In January 2022, a dilapidated Victorian in the Noe Valley neighborhood of San Francisco sold for nearly $2 million. The house was virtually uninhabitable with no bedrooms and boarded windows. The rest of the country was shocked, but this wasn't an outlier. It was just San Francisco being San Francisco. This is a city where a median home costs $1.7 million, where renters pay more than Manhattan, and where teachers, nurses, and artists are being priced out of their own communities. But this story didn't start in 2022, or even in 2008. It began in 1849 with a gold rush that never quite ended. This is the story of how San Francisco became the most expensive city in America. Before the gold fever hit, San Francisco was home to barely a few hundred people. But once news spread that gold had been discovered in the Sierra Nevada foothills, the world rushed in. The population of San Francisco exploded from about 500 in 1847 to roughly 25,000 just 3 years later. Fortune seekers from across the globe poured into the ramshackle town, and a wild anything-goes economy sprang up overnight. Prices for everything skyrocketed. With thousands of miners striking it rich and then splurging their gold dust in town, San Francisco saw mind-boggling inflation. One visiting reporter in 1849 found that hotel rooms were renting for $10,000 a month, and a single egg might sell for what would be $90 today. During this time, the city's first real estate bubble was born. Land values shot up wildly. Early residents realized they could often get rich not by mining gold, but by supplying the necessities of the miners and speculating in real estate. In other words, the first great California fortunes were built on land and opportunity, a pattern that would echo through San Francisco's history. By the 1850s, San Francisco was firmly established as a boomtown, but San Francisco's boom and bust journey was just beginning. After booming for decades, disaster struck on April 18, 1906. A massive earthquake, estimated magnitude 7.9, ripped through the Bay Area at dawn. Fires broke out and raged for 3 days, ultimately consuming almost 500 city blocks. The destruction was immense. Over 28,000 buildings were destroyed, including most of downtown. Hundreds of thousands were left homeless. Yet in true San Francisco spirit, the city's response was to rebuild, and to rebuild quickly. With millions of dollars in insurance payments coming in, property owners hurried to put up new buildings on the old street grid and claim their piece of recovery. In 1909, San Francisco had enacted a new building code, but this code did not fundamentally change its laissez-faire development process. In essence, if you owned a lot and met the basic fire and seismic codes, you could rebuild wherever you wanted. San Francisco rose from its ashes remarkably fast. Within a few years, a new city skyline of masonry buildings and steel-framed skyscrapers stood where wooden Victorian houses once did. But the rebuilding boom also reinforced patterns that would later fuel the affordability crisis. The city missed its chance to plan for more orderly growth or carve out more housing. Instead, developers built as they pleased, and working-class refugee camps gave way to expensive real estate almost overnight. By 1915, San Francisco was triumphant, hosting a World's Fair to announce its rebirth. But the seeds were sown for future battles over who would get to live in this increasingly pricey city. Fast forward to the mid-20th century. By the 1950s, San Francisco population had peaked and begun to decline as family moved to the suburbs. City leaders grew concerned that San Francisco was blighted and falling behind. The solution, they thought, was urban renewal, a wave of federally funded projects to revitalize aging neighborhoods. One of the most infamous cases was the redevelopment of the Fillmore district. In the post-World War II years, the Fillmore was a thriving, diverse, working-class neighborhood. But the area was targeted by planners as a slum ripe for clearance. Starting in the late 1950s and 60s, the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency demolished block after block of the Fillmore's Victorian homes. The Fillmore redevelopment became one of the largest urban renewal projects on the West Coast, and its impact was devastating. In total, it uprooted nearly 20,000 people from the city. And when replacement housing and upscale condominiums finally opened in the 80s, most former residents couldn't afford to return. By the 1970s, San Francisco's pendulum swung from aggressive development to aggressive preservation. The city's experiences with urban renewal and freeway plans had triggered a grassroots backlash. Neighborhood activists adopted an ethos often dubbed NIMBY, meaning not in my backyard. They were wary of change and determined to save San Francisco from unchecked growth. Large swaths of San Francisco were rezoned to favor single-family homes or low-rise buildings. In most residential areas, buildings over 40 feet tall were banned, effectively capping development at about 3 or 4 stories. Strict historic preservation rules took hold to protect the city's famed Victorian houses. By the late 1970s, getting a big project approved in San Francisco meant running a gauntlet of community hearings, environmental reviews, and likely lawsuits. At first, these anti-growth policies didn't seem to hurt. In fact, through the 1970s, San Francisco's population was still shrinking. Fewer people meant less housing demand, so halting development felt like a workable, even wise choice. City leaders also enacted rent control in 1979, aiming to protect tenants from rising rents in older buildings. In 1986, voters passed Proposition M, a law capping the square footage of new downtown offices per year to slow corporate development. The planning culture had firmly shifted. Where the 1950s had pro-growth boosterism, the 1970s and 80s embraced preservation and neighborhood control. San Francisco essentially stopped building large amounts of housing during these decades, and for a little while, that seemed fine, but then the tech booms arrived. In the late 1990s, San Francisco was hit by the dot-com bubble. Hundreds of internet startups sprang up, and many chose to locate right in the city, especially in the South of Market Warehouse District and the artsy Mission District. This influx of venture capital and young tech workers set off a rent explosion. From roughly 1995 to 2000, average rents in San Francisco skyrocketed. Some measures showed a jump of around 50% or more in a few short years. Neighborhoods like the Mission saw tech workers willing to pay whatever price landlords name, driving up rents and displacing longtime tenants. No-fault eviction surged as well. Longtime residents were pushed out as young tech employees with stock option wealth moved in. But the 2010s unleashed an even bigger technology boom centered on San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Companies like Twitter, Uber, and Airbnb set up headquarters in the city, while giants Google, Apple, and Facebook ran shuttles to bring San Francisco-based workers down to their campuses. This post-2010 tech boom poured fuel on an already hot housing market. Consider this, in October 2015, San Francisco officially had the highest rents of any major U.S. city. The median one-bedroom rent was around $3,700 at its peak, far above New York, LA, or anywhere else. And it wasn't just rentals. Home prices went insane. Between 2012 and 2017 alone, the median house price in the Bay Area nearly doubled, passing the $1 million mark for the first time in San Francisco's history. So is this price level sustainable, or will it go down? Well, history in San Francisco shows that change is constant. The city has reinvented itself before, and perhaps the housing crisis will spur another reinvention, one that makes San Francisco more affordable. Thanks for watching.